Hello and welcome to Lynchburg Live. I'm your host, Linda Smith. Lately, Nooks and Kindles and a variety of e-readers have changed the face of reading a book as we've known it. My guest tonight is Joyce Maddox, longtime office manager for Warwick House Publishing right here in Lynchburg. Joyce will be telling us about book publishing, how to get your own book published, and if the e-readers are likely to replace real books in our lives. Joyce, welcome to Lynchburg Live.
Thank you very much.
I'm so delighted to have you.
Good to be here.
As we get started, for our audience who may not know or may not be aware that we have a publishing company like Warwick House here in Lynchburg, will you just tell them where it is and what it is?
Well, Warwick House is at 720 Court Street, which is at the corner of 8th and Court. Been in business since 1985. The business was started by Dr. Peter Halk, who's a pediatrician.
Right.
Dr. Halk had wanted to write books, and there was not a publishing company, so he decided to have one. And so he implemented on a desktop computer the first publishing company in Lynchburg.
That is just so cool. And you know, it must be wonderful if you want to publish a book, you start a company. Well, he's had tremendous success with this.
Yes, he has.
Now, the building that Warwick House is located in it's an historic building here in Lynchburg.
It is. It was built in 1826 for the mayor of the city of Lynchburg, who was John Marshall Warwick. And John Warwick Daniel was his grandson. John Warwick Daniel was a famous Civil War hero. He became a senator in Washington, was a great orator. He had a wound in Civil War, and he recuperated in the basement with his leg up in a thing up in the rafter of the building. I can't think of what it was. But anyway, he was in traction there, and he's buried at Spring Hill Cemetery in Lynchburg.
So the house really has a lot of history.
A lot of history.
Now, your job as an office manager for this, how long have you been doing this?
I have been there, I think, about 15 years.
And what does your job involve? Just talking to you, I get the idea that you wear many hats.
I do. I talk to clients about their book and really their authors. We have a round table similar to this one in the office. It's a little bit larger than this, and so we sit there and spread out their work and look at it and talk about it. Sometimes they tell me the whole story when they're there. I proof and edit.
Great.
I have a lady who works with me from her home who does the formatting for our books. We get estimates from printing companies to see how much it will cost to print however many copies of a book they want. If they want hardback, softback, whatever size they want, we can do almost any size that they want. It is a lot involved in publishing a book, but the gift is really the author's. It is a gift to be able to write.
I'm sure it is.
But I learn a lot from these people. Sometimes it's a history book, sometimes it's a novel. I'm working on a book right now about World War II, about the Guadalcanal battle. We've done poetry books, children's books, genealogy, fiction.
You know, your job is probably like what I'm doing. Every time I do a show and do research for a show, I learn something. And so you're really in the same position.
Mm-hmm. You do. But as office manager, I have to do it all. So I pay the bills, and I open the mail, and I answer the phone, and I sweep the floor.
So you wear a lot of hats.
But also in that building, we have some apartments, and so I have to lease apartments and collect rent and pay bills.
Are you the only person that's there all day long?
I am.
Who all sits in on this round table discussion with the prospective author?
I do. I sit there with them. So I'm the only person who sits there with them.
So you have a lot of talent. I mean, it takes a lot of talent to be able to proof these things and
Well, it's a niche, I think. You just grow into it, and I've grown into it, and I've enjoyed it.
I think that's what counts, that you enjoy your work.
Right.
Well, what other services do you offer?
Well, basically that's it. We just are a book publisher. So I type. Sometimes people bring me handwritten material and I type.
That's going that extra mile.
It is.
All right, so this is basically a self-publishing.
It is. It's also called Vanity Press, and that means that people pay us to publish their books.
Right.
Oftentimes they are there because they've tried to go the big publishing house and they don't have results, but because they've worked so long on this manuscript, they want to get it done.
And I don't blame them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and there's probably a lot of talent out there bringing you books this way.
Well, there is. Usually people know what it is that they're writing about. It could be, if it's a genealogy, they learn a lot about their families
Right.
while they're doing this work. But when somebody writes a novel, to me that's just a real talent for somebody to be able to draw from their own imagination.
Oh, I think so.
And put it into words.
All right, why do you think, you know, and just looking at trends, to me it looks like more and more people are going the self-publishing route. Why do you think that is? Is it just because of the difficulty getting into some of these bigger publishing houses?
Well, it's hard to say. I think in Lynchburg, probably because they're not known authors, or they don't plan to write any more books. They just will do their genealogy or their history, and they like being able to talk to somebody locally, and they have control. I mean, they have the final say on what's put in that book.
And I think that probably is one of the biggest selling points for self-publishing.
I think.
Is being able to control, you know,
The
your work.
content.
Yeah, you know, just listening to you, I have seen other people who self-publish and have gone to these publishing places. They give them the manuscript, and all they do is print it and put it under a cover, and it comes to them with no editing, no proofing, and to me, you could go down to Copycat and get that. But the services you offer sound like, you know, it's certainly a well-rounded.
I'll say this, real often people have brought manuscripts and they say, it's already been edited, so you don't need to proof it. Well, I don't publish anything unless I proof it. And there are always errors. I mean, it's just really hard to get perfection in a book, and we strive.
You know, I think some of that is when the author is trying to proof it yourself, you get so close to it, you've seen it so many times that you just automatically miss those errors because you're used to seeing them where they are.
Well, your mind tells you what's supposed to be there.
Right.
And your eyes don't see it.
All right, Joyce, now tell me, if somebody wants to publish a book, if they have a book and they want it published and they come to you, what's the first thing that they should do, even before they come to you?
Well, once they've written their manuscript and had it typed preferably, they should go over that manuscript time and time again to be sure that it says what they want it to say. Carolyn Fagans, for instance, who wrote this book, Through My Window, which is a devotional book, she has written 7 other books, and she goes over it and over it and over it and over it before she brings it to me. And that's what anybody should do, is just go over it many, many times.
And you know, something that you said, I don't know if you told me on the phone or if you've said it already, is to write what you know about.
Right.
Because it's very difficult to go off half-cocked trying to write something that you have no background in.
Well, that is true. Sometimes, though, people will write historical books, and so they do a lot of research to get the information for that. For instance, we've just been working on a book for this gentleman in Glen Allen, Virginia, and his father was in a battle at Guadalcanal in World War II, and his father never talked about that battle very much, and so this man wanted to record it, so he did a lot of research and wrote a book about the Battle of Guadalcanal, and that was with the Japanese. Very brutal battle.
It's something he feels passionate about,
Yes.
wanting to share.
Right, and to record the history of it.
I think that's I just think that's great, and I do think that it's wonderful that this is here, that this publishing house is here, has a good reputation, has a lot of years behind it, and has published some good books.
Right.
Especially for people who want to do that. Could you tell us several other titles and authors that we might be familiar with?
Well, Jim Elson wrote a history of Lynchburg, Virginia, the first 200 years. Philip Scruggs years ago had written the first 100 years. So Jim Elson followed up with another 100 years of history of Lynchburg. Valuable history. Oh, this is that book right here. This is Lynchburg, Virginia. And he has some colored pictures in it depicting prominent scenes in Lynchburg.
Now this is a beautiful book.
Mm-hmm.
It's a hardback.
Mm-hmm. It's hardback.
And you do hardbacks and
softbacks.
Softbacks.
This book is black and white pictures of dancers at the dance theater. And this book was published as a fundraiser for the dance theater. Bill Tucker, who is a local author, wrote a novel. Joe Lusardi has written several books of poetry. He leaves those in nursing homes and doctors' waiting rooms and hospital rooms if he can get them in there. He doesn't charge for them, he just leaves them.
That's a nice thing. So you do find that some of the authors who come to you and self-publish are doing it because they want to share their work more than they want to
Right.
become rich
Right.
doing this.
There's a man named Jim Morrison who wrote a book about the Bedford boys in World War II. And he updated that because he got some more information. I'm not sure he has any more copies of that book now, but just lots of different titles that we've done.
While we're talking about this, you've brought some pictures of some of the books. Phil, if you'll put those pictures up, we'll get Joyce to tell us about them.
Well, this is the front of Jim Elson's
Yeah.
book.
That's the one we just saw.
This is the old city market.
So we're going. I just had those people on right before Christmas from
Really?
the city market.
That was the city market. This book was written by Tulane Patterson. It's a book of poetry, and that's his father sitting on the bank of a river somewhere, probably in England. His father was in service there, smoking a cigarette. This book was written by Rebecca Pitzenbarger. Becky has MS, and so this book is her journey with MS, and her husband drew that picture for the cover. He teaches art at Amherst County High School.
I took art from his father.
Did you?
Yes.
Right. It's a long journey. My Only Sons was written by Mr. Lawless up in Fairfax, Virginia. These two boys were in Halifax County. One had been a student at Hampden-Sydney College, and the other went into service, where the other boy, who was at Hampden-Sydney, dropped out of school and went into the war. They both were killed on Clouds Mountain on the same day, but not in the same battle. But they were the only two boys this family had. And this is Carolyn Fagan's last book, Through My Window. It's a devotional book. And she used the season of Lent. I guess it was year before last, or maybe last year. We finished this book for the fall season. And she used the season of Lent to give up something. So what she gave up, she got on the treadmill and walked every day on the treadmill. Because that was something hard for her. But isn't it pretty?
It is a pretty book cover.
And the pictures in it, she took most of them herself, printed in color. And that's the cover of a book, The Free Public Schools in Lynchburg. And that house in the white was a school.
I love this cover. That is a wonderful cover.
Well, Sam Johnston was the judge in Campbell County, and he's a wonderful storyteller. But somebody had painted that picture, that's his dog, painted that picture for him that hangs at his home. Delightful.
And what a perfect book cover. That's wonderful. I think that may be it. All right, I want to ask you, from the time that a prospective published author comes to you with their manuscript and you get it, well, from the time they come to you, how long does it take approximately to get it in a condition to sell?
Well, it depends on the size of the book, for one thing. Of course, a smaller book can be done much quicker.
Right.
This book took months.
I'm sure.
Because it takes a long time to proof it, and I have to proof it more than once because you just miss things.
You do.
And then sometimes they change their mind about something. They want to add something or take out something. So I would guess from 4 to 6 months on the outside.
On the average.
Mm-hmm.
What can people expect to make on a book? I mean, all right, let's take something small. Like you showed me a 5 by 8.5, I think it was, or 5.5 by 8.5.
If he sold that book, it would be $10.
Okay.
I mean, he will sell it for $10. This book is $22.
And that's hardback, and it's got
hardback.
pictures.
Mm-hmm. Color pictures.
Color pictures, so that makes a difference.
This book is $35. Yeah, $35. And I don't know what they're selling that book for.
Do you make suggestions to your authors about what they should market the book for?
We talk about it, trying to at least get their money back,
Right.
whether or not they make money. And
It would just be nice to get it back.
Right. And I think usually they do get their money back, except for Joe, because he
Who's
gives
giving
them
some
away. But that would be the goal. So we just take what it costs them to produce the book. That includes the publishing costs and the printing costs, and divide it by the number of copies that they order to get a price.
This may be a question you can't answer, but do you have a ballpark figure for how much something like that would cost if it's just, you know, not a big fancy book, maybe soft cover?
This book probably cost close to $10,000 for the publishing part, and she ordered 1,000 copies.
Ooh, that is a lot of money. Mm-hmm. So that's $11,000 she's invested in this.
Well, no, 10.
10.
Mm-hmm. But she'll probably get that back. And she'll usually order a smaller quantity just to be sure all the bugs are out of it.
Right. So how many books do people usually order on their first run?
Sometimes 500, sometimes 1,000. Sometimes Carolyn has ordered 2,000 in a novel.
So this is not an inexpensive venture. It's going to cost some money.
Mm-hmm. Now, Mr. Ellison has told me that he's gotten his money back, and he still has some books.
That's great.
Mm-hmm. So we strive for that.
What about Amazon.com? You know, you don't have to pay anything for that, and you don't have to have hard copies. Is that correct? You just...
Well, people can sign up at Amazon. There's a screen that they can go in to sell their books. It certainly helps to have a picture of your book on there. We don't do that for our customers, but they can do that themselves.
How about if your author wants pictures and illustrations and doesn't have them? Do you find a photographer or an illustrator for them?
We have done that. Usually people have their pictures. Carolyn, for instance, took all of her pictures. Jim went to Jones Memorial Library because his is history, so got a lot of old pictures. So usually they provide them. But we have had a couple of customers where they paid for an artist to do their work.
Now, you said that you have someone who does the layout.
Right.
Okay, that's somebody specific who does that. And what would you suggest for marketing?
One of the first things I tell my customers is to talk to the local bookshops to see if they can get a signing set up, to talk to Darryl Laurent at the newspaper office to see if he would put their book in his column,
Yeah.
which he's been real good about doing, to go to local gift shops, anybody they know where they might be able to sell the books.
Do Barnes & Noble, are they open, that you know of, receptive to having somebody come and do something like that?
Well, they used to be, but since they've gone New York style, they're
I didn't
not
know
as
that.
good about that anymore.
All right. So that would be the best approach locally. Locally, and maybe Amazon.com if they want to get the word out all over the place.
And they also can sign up with Barnes & Noble.
That's, I mean, you know, it just sounds like such a process no matter what.
It is a process. Now with Barnes & Noble, and Jim Ellison, for instance, did sign up with Barnes & Noble. He has to ship his books to New York, and then they ship them back to Lynchburg.
Oh my goodness, there's another cost.
We did have a customer, actually it was they are therapists. They wrote a book entitled My Past is Now My Future. And one of the therapists said that when people get dementia, the color that they can see is like chartreuse green. So the cover of their book is in chartreuse green.
Didn't know that.
He goes out speaking to nurses conferences, lots of conferences, and they'll order 1,000 or 2,000 copies of that book at a time.
That's wonderful.
They have put it on Amazon. And it's a wonderful little book. It sells for $20, but it has a chart in there that everybody should fill out so that if you get sick, or if you go into dementia, family members will know what's normal for you. Like, how do you wash your face? Which hand do you use? What time do you get up?
And see, that's a service.
It's in their book, though, and it's a wonderful chart for people. My past is now my future.
And what a wonderful title.
Mm-hmm.
All right, now, do you need a literary agent if you're going to self-publish a book?
You do not.
Okay, all right. That's just something if you're going to a major company.
Right.
All right, how about copyrights for your book?
We copyright for them. Register the copyright.
That's great. Now, the thing I said when we opened is about all these Nooks and Kindles.
Right.
And, you know, it really has changed the face in a matter of months. It's changed the face of the way people read a book. And, you know, I'm still very much against that because for me, I like to hold a book. I like to smell a new book. There's nothing like the smell of a vintage book, you know, just to spend an afternoon with. Right. I like holding that book. But what do you think this says to the future of printed books?
Well, we don't know for sure. I was over at Office Max this afternoon and I looked at the Kindles and I thought, do I like that? And I'm not sure I do, but I'm not real sure I don't.
Right.
Depends on where you are, I think. A book is heavy. A book like this is heavy to carry. But I like to hold them too, and I just hope that the printed book does not go out.
I would hate to have to go to a museum to see a book. I got my husband a Nook for Christmas, and he carries it with him all the time. And you know, I do see that it's a convenience. And when my mom was so ill, she loved to read, but holding a big book was really difficult for her, and she would try to wait until it came out in paperback, and then she couldn't see it. But having something like that would be ideal for her. But I have a library at my house, and I just like the way those books are in that library.
Because you can see more than one at a time.
You can, and I mean, it's like choices are just right there in front of you. And you know, my mom taught me to read since I was a little child. She used to read to me, and you know, so I've kept on reading.
Can you imagine looking at a cookbook on a Kindle?
No, I cannot. That's something I have got to spread out on my counter and keep running back and looking for it. But I guess it's all in what you get used to, and people will get used to doing that too.
And the younger generation, I think they grow up with all that technology, and so it's not unique to them.
Do you think that more and more would-be authors are going to be turning to self-publishing in the future?
It's hard to know. I think locally they will be self-publishing just because they haven't been able to get an agent.
Right. It seems to be a difficult business to get into.
It is.
Does Warwick House have a website? We only have about 3 more minutes.
Okay, good. It's warwickpublishers.com. I think that's right.
How would somebody contact you if they have a book and they see this show and they say, oh, here's an avenue, here's some place I can go?
Well, they can send an email to whp720@aol.com. Our phone number is 434-846-1200.
And you're in the phone book?
And we're in the phone book.
Now, there are some other publishing houses in Lynchburg. I did notice that,
Mm-hmm.
but from what I understand, yours is the oldest and probably the most established.
The most established at this point.
At this point. All right. Have you ever written a book?
I have not. I am a reader. No, I've not written a book.
Have you ever had the urge to write a book after spending 16 years taking care of other people's books?
I have thought one time I was going to write a book about my husband's hunting.
Okay.
He's a big hunter. And it was going to be titled The Hunter's Widow.
Oh, that's a good title.
So I've got the title.
All right, I want you to tell me, in all these years that you've been doing this, what have you found the most rewarding thing about this job?
I have met some of the most interesting people, and to learn how they think and what they do. Last year or the year before, we did a book for a lady who had cancer, and she had journaled her cancer, and we published that book for her. And she passed away 2 or 3 weeks after that book was published.
But how wonderful that she saw it published.
She saw it, but what she did was to let other people know how you can work through it.
And you can. I just think that's wonderful.
She did that. But all of these people that I've worked with, they all have a story to tell. And so I learned something new every time I talk to somebody.
I think that's wonderful, Joyce, and I'm really kind of envious of the job you do. I think it must be
It's interesting.
just something fun to do, too.
I don't mind getting up and going to work.
That's great. I really thank you for being my guest on the show tonight, and I think it's been very informative. And there may be authors out there just sitting on a manuscript not knowing what to do with it, and now they've seen you and they know that they can do this right in Lynchburg.
Yesterday I talked to a gentleman. He said, I didn't know where to go. I said, well, come to my table.
Now you know. Thank you again.
I thank you.
I hope you've enjoyed tonight's show. My next show will feature the Amherst Relay for Life. Thank you for watching. Have a wonderful evening. Good night.